Which diet to balance your hormones? I feel like hormone imbalance is a term you hear a lot in wellness spaces, and you have all kinds of diets and supplements to balance your hormones or regulate your hormones, but are these actually legit? Do you actually need to be balancing your hormones? Can you do so with nutrition? Which hormones need balancing? And how to do that. We're going to address all of this in this video. So first, let's try to understand hormonal imbalance. So when you hear people talk about balancing hormones, usually they are going to refer to symptoms which are, according to them, consequences of having hormones that are out of balance. And these symptoms can be things like weight gain or difficulty with weight loss, or difficulty sleeping, or mood swings, or skin issues, hair issues, things like that. And then in recent years, balancing hormones has been used as a marketing tool to sell a bunch of supplements or diet plans or things like that in order to regulate hormones. Which hormones? They never say. The thing is that while some of these issues may have hormonal roots, that doesn't mean that it's something that you can directly affect. There are complex feedback mechanisms happening in your body. It's not like you can just eat something and then that will change your hormones. It's a little bit more complicated than that. Now, I'm not saying that you can't do anything in regards to your diet to change your hormones, to balance your hormones, but usually it's not as simple as just taking one supplement or eating one thing and this will exactly pinpoint your hormonal imbalance. But that's kind of what they try to get you to think in marketing terms. Many of these products are like quick fix approaches, and it's either you take the supplement and you're gonna balance out your hormones perfectly, everything is gonna be fine. It's completely going to undermine the actual complexity of hormone balancing, and it's also going to sometimes target hormones, either not target any specific hormones or target things that have no real scientific backing. For instance, I see a lot of cures for like adrenal fatigue. So yes, you do have adrenal glands that are on top of your kidneys and they do produce certain hormones, but there's like no scientific justification to taking kind of like certain detoxing, hormone balancing mixtures that are then going to positively affect the hormone production in your adrenal glands. This is just an example. This is one I see a lot, and this is one that is not rooted in science. Now, you do have some hormones that can be impacted by your diet, your nutrition. Those will include hormones like leptin and ghrelin and cortisol and estrogen, things like that. We're going to talk about that a little bit later on more in detail. But the general kind of overview I want you to get is that balancing hormones is kind of a trendy thing right now, but it's not really something you need to be focusing on. The way I see it, it's either you have a big issue, a big hormonal issue, and then you absolutely need to be talking to a doctor about it and taking correct medication for it, or you just have these symptoms but you don't really know, so you're thinking maybe it can be your hormones. And in this case, you can think about your nutrition, you can do the things I'm going to talk about, but the things I'm going to talk about, they're also linked to just your overall well-being, wellness in general. So I don't think that you should be doing anything specific, taking like specific targeted supplements, going on cures or whatever for your hormones. So that being said, here are the hormones that are impacted by your nutrition. The first one is insulin. The way that insulin works is that when you eat sugar, you're going to have sugar in your bloodstream, and insulin is going to signal to your body that you need to take the sugar from the bloodstream and absorb it into the cells where it can then be used for a lot of different functions. So obviously, if you're constantly eating high sugar foods, you're constantly going to be spiking your blood sugar and then subsequently spiking your insulin, and that is not something that you want to be doing. This can over time lead to insulin resistance, meaning that even when you do eat sugar, your body is not going to be able to produce enough insulin, or insulin is not going to be able to get the sugar in your blood into your cells. So that can be an issue. And then this can affect your energy levels, your hunger levels, fat storage, all of that. So then you have cortisol, which is known as the stress hormone because it will be released in bigger quantities when you are under stress, and it plays a role in your fight or flight response, like your stress response. It plays a role in your immune response, in your metabolism, as well as in your blood sugar regulation. But if you are chronically stressed or eat in a way that doesn't support your immune system, then your cortisol may be too high, and this can lead to weight gain and sleep problems and difficulty managing your blood sugar levels. Now, leptin and ghrelin are the two hormones that I would say are the most impacted by your nutrition, because they are actually hormones that directly participate in your hunger and fullness levels. So you have leptin, which is the fullness hormone, basically the satiety hormone that will signal fullness, and then you have ghrelin that is the hunger hormone and will signal hunger. And so obviously if these hormones are off, you can either have a very high appetite and no ability to feel fullness, or oppositely, you can feel that you're never hungry and that you're constantly full. And then another hormone that can be impacted by your diet is estrogen. Now, of course, it is mostly regulated in the ovaries. However, some foods do contain phytoestrogens that are plant-based compounds that can bind to one of the receptors of estrogen, and they can kind of mimic the effect of estrogen, but they will do so in a more positive way. Let's say they are not cancer inducing or anything like that, but they can definitely be helpful hormone to look into if you are, for instance, during menopause or pre or post menopause, you will have a low or no estrogen, and therefore phytoestrogens can help with that hormone. So now let's talk about how you can eat to balance your hormones, and these are actually going to be science-based tips. So first I'm going to talk about general tips for balanced hormones, and then we're going to go through the hormones that I talked about earlier, and we're going to see specific tips for each of them. But in general, you want to keep your blood sugar pretty stable. So that means that you don't want to be eating huge amounts of just sugar for one meal and then not anything for like 8 hours, and then again a load of sugar. So you want to be eating meals that are pretty regular, like every 4 hours, let's say. You want to make sure that you are choosing whole foods as much as possible, whole carb sources, and that you are combining carbs with fiber, with protein, with fats, so that will slow down the absorption of glucose, and you won't have this huge spike that will then trigger insulin, and that can then cause insulin resistance, like we talked about earlier, if you do it too much. Another thing you want to be mindful of is to eat enough healthy fats, because you actually need fats to make the hormones. For instance, you need to be getting enough omega-3s you can get from fatty fish or from seeds like chia seeds, flax seeds, and you should also be getting monounsaturated fats like avocado and olives and olive oil. Of course, you want to make sure that you're eating enough protein as well, which is going to help with overall satiety and then help with stabilizing blood sugar, for instance, like we talked about. Fiber is also very important. It's going to help with the sugar balancing, like we talked about, and it also helps with the actual managing of the hormones, like elimination and things like that. And what you also want to do is you really want to avoid extreme diets at all costs. If you are starving yourself, obviously that is going to affect your hormones. It's going to trigger your cortisol because you're going to be stressed, your body's going to be stressed. It is going to trigger your leptin and ghrelin. Probably your leptin is going to be inhibited, so that means that you're not going to be able to feel fullness anymore, and then conversely your ghrelin is going to be stimulated so that you are encouraged to feed your body. So that's going to make things a little bit out of whack. So making sure that you're not going on restrictive diets is probably the main thing that you can do to balance your hormones. You also want to make sure that you are eating healthy, balanced meals regularly. Again, you don't want to be doing like one meal a day, because that's just going to be dumping a bunch of food and a bunch of work, and it can make like your hormones kind of wild for a little bit, and then you have nothing for like I don't know, 16 hours. So that's not good. You just want to find balance as much as possible. You want to be careful with your meal times as well. Make sure that you're eating at a pretty consistent time, on a pretty consistent schedule, and that your calories are pretty balanced throughout the different meals that you're having. So to manage insulin, you want to make sure that you're eating plenty of whole carbs, so whole grains, fruit, veggies, legumes, things like that, and that you are pairing them with sources of fats and protein so that the sugar is absorbed more slowly into your body. Whenever you do eat refined carbs, it is good to pair them with other sources of food as well, protein, fats, or even more whole sources of carbs. Like when I have candy, sometimes I pair that with a fruit because I know that the fiber in the fruit will also help. For cortisol, you want to make sure that you're eating plenty of foods that are rich in antioxidants, like fruit and veggies, and other things like herb spices. If you want to know more about which foods you should be eating and which foods have which antioxidants, you can check out the video I made about that right here. And you also want to be eating omega-3s that you can get from fatty fish or certain nut seeds like chia seeds, flax seeds, walnuts, things like that. For leptin and ghrelin, the main thing is going to be making sure that your meals are structured and regular, and that you have enough food, of course, and not too much either, that you're listening to your hunger cues. And the more you focus on whole foods, the easier it will be for you to listen to your hunger fullness cues, because if you're eating a bunch of like highly palatable, super sugary, super high in fat foods, it's harder to regulate that. Now, of course, you shouldn't be restricting these foods either, just focusing on increasing the whole foods, making sure that they're making up the bulk of your diet. And then for estrogen, foods with phytoestrogens, mainly soy and like all soy-based products, and flax seeds as well, they can help. Now, you don't want to be like overdoing this and eating 10 different soy products every day, but if you're eating soy maybe like around 5 times a week, it's like different soy products 5 times a week, let's say, plenty of tofu, things like that, then that can be a beneficial source of phytoestrogen. And also make sure that you're eating plenty of fiber. Again, like we talked about earlier, this will kind of help with the elimination. So now let's touch on other lifestyle factors you need to be mindful of in order to balance your hormones. So your sleep can throw off your cortisol, your insulin, your leptin and ghrelin. So you really want to make sure that you're getting around 7 to 9 hours of sleep every day. Physical activity as well is very important to regulate your hormones, and if you are exercising in a moderate way, that is ideal. And if you exercise too much though, that can impact your cortisol, but most people don't need to worry about that. Worry about moving your body. And then stress management is super important as well. If you're constantly stressed, then it can be very difficult to have hormones that are properly regulated. Specifically, your cortisol is going to spike a lot, and that's going to affect other things as well. So you want to make sure that you're taking the time to do things that relax you, remove stressors if you can, but I know that's hard. And then make sure that you're doing activities that recharge you and that you enjoy. And you can do things like meditation, yoga, deep breathing techniques, petting animals. And now I really want to touch on the business of balancing hormones regulation, all of that. It's important that you realize that a lot of this is marketing. Like a lot of the things that are going to be advertising, regulating hormones, balancing hormones, it's either not really going to do anything except make you lose your money, or worst case scenario, it can actually be dangerous. Sometimes you're also going to get diet plans, things like that, that will claim to regulate your hormones. But again, it's going to be very general messaging. It's not going to tell you which hormones are targeted or what like specific ingredients are going to do, how it's going to work, how it's going to affect that, or it's going to use terms like reduce adrenal fatigue, like I talked about earlier, that again, while there are certain symptoms that can be associated with adrenal fatigue, it's not something that's really backed scientifically. So you really need to be careful with these things. And in general, I think the best way to do things is to do what I talked about, meaning things that are also going to be good for your body in general. Like usually you're not going to have to eat one way to regulate hormones, and then another way to lose weight, and then another way for optimal health, and then it's all different. No, usually when you're eating healthy balanced meals, it's going to be pretty similar regardless of what your goals are. But of course that doesn't sell as well as trying to give you this little perfect package of hormone regulating supplements or this little diet plan that is going to regulate your hormones. Remember that you cannot be using one size fits all approaches to regulate your hormones if you're trying to look for supplements or pills or things or systems, whatever. They will all work differently in different individuals. There are other factors that need to be taken into account, and sometimes over supplementing can further dysregulate your hormonal cycles. And make sure as well that if you're suffering from things like PCOS or hyper or hypothyroidism or diabetes, that you are being followed by a doctor that can give you the proper medication and then maybe help you with hormone regulation in a way that is scientifically valid. So that's it for this video. I hope you found it helpful. It was pretty highly requested in my comments. I got asked to do it multiple times. So I hope you're satisfied with it. And if you did enjoy it, don't forget to like it, subscribe, and see you on my next one. Bye.